to talk about healthier ingredient substitutes, and these are just recommendations and suggestions on ways that we can reduce our added sugar intake and salt intake. So one of the ways is, of course, having as many fresh fruits and vegetables as much as possible, and even just frozen fruit and frozen vegetables, because they typically have less added salt in the bags compared to canned goods. However, there's still ways that we can reduce our sugar and salt intake by knowing what products to shop for on the grocery store shelves. First, we'll start talking about ways that we can reduce our sugar intake. So typically high sugar foods can be found in cereals, especially kids cereals, yogurts, granola bars, juices, obviously. So when we're looking for fruit juices, we want to aim for 100% fruit juice and not necessarily things like fruit punch or fruit cocktails or things like that will definitely have added sugar in them. Of course, we can also mix in a little bit of water to dilute the juice, and that's less added sugars that kids will consume as well. When you're shopping in your cereal aisles for cereals for breakfast or granola bars for snacks, some of the key things that I like to recommend is remembering two numbers is to have at least 4 grams of fiber and less than 8 grams of sugar. So what we can do is then we can look at the nutrition facts label. This will tell you the cold hard facts about how much sugar, how much salt, how much fiber, and all the other nutrients that are labeled on a nutrition label that can tell you. Sometimes the front package of a food, it can be very deceiving to make it look extra healthy, but sometimes that can be tricky. And so to make sure that you're really shopping for healthier alternatives, it's good to look at the nutrition label. So as you can see here, the amount of fiber on this cereal in particular has 13 grams of fiber for every 1 cup that you pour for yourself or your child. And so, as I talked about before, we want a cereal that has at least 4 grams of fiber in each serving. So this has almost more than triple the amount of fiber that we typically recommend. And fiber is a great nutrient because it not only keeps our digestive system healthy, but also it keeps us full for longer. So when your kids go off to school, having a nice bowl of cereal, they're not starving by the time they get to lunch. So the next ingredient below fiber is sugar. So remember, I mentioned that we aim for cereals that have 8 grams or less of sugar. So in this one, you can see that in 1 serving, there's 7 grams of sugar, which is a really just a good number to aim for. Sometimes with sugars, it does give kids a burst of energy if they eat high sugar cereals, but the same burst of energy is also the same time that they'll actually come down from that burst of energy and they'll get kind of sleepy by mid-morning. And so that's why we like to have that good chunk of fiber in their breakfast as well. All right, so this is an example of a good cereal to have in the morning. Another way is that if your kids are pretty stuck on a specific brand or brands of cereals they already enjoy for breakfast, another way that I like to recommend to have the best of both worlds is to mix that kid cereal with some brand cereals. So for example, like Bran Buds or Bran Flakes, you mix them, even just add like a couple tablespoons to start with into their cereal, or even just and gradually work up to 1/4 of a cup or half and half. It would be a great alternative as well, so that it's not like you're completely switching out kids cereals altogether, but it's just a way that kids can enjoy the best of both worlds as well. So the same numbers apply mostly to granola bars as well, although you'll find that typically granola bars have higher sugar intake. So try to do the best to stick within the 4 grams of fiber and the 8 grams or less of sugar. This one in particular has a little bit less fiber than about 2 grams, but also this portion size compared to 1 cup of cereal is quite a bit smaller. And this one also has 6 grams of sugar in the granola bar as well. So it's good to always check the label labels to make sure you're trying to choose the best that you can in terms of less sugar for cereals. Yogurt, as I mentioned, is also another potential food that can have a lot of added sugar, in particular for flavored yogurt. So you can, one of the ways I suggest is to switch to plain yogurt, and you can sweeten it yourself with maple syrup or even applesauce or honey, because typically when you sweeten your own foods, it's going to be quite a bit less sweeter than what's already packaged in an already sweetened food. And then you can add your own fruit or even just like granola on top for yourself or for your kids. Another way to do it is if there's a specific fruit flavored yogurt that you or your kids are already into, it's good to also try to do in half mix, or maybe like a quarter of the plain yogurt mixed with the rest with the flavored yogurt, and that also reduces the amount of added sugars that you're consuming as well. And things like Greek yogurt will also contain some added protein, and that too mixed with fruit flavored yogurt will give you that extra sense of fullness as well. That can also help keep kids fuller until it's lunchtime at school or at home. And yeah, so let's move on to ways in which we can reduce our salt intake. So typically high salt foods can be found in prepackaged or canned goods. And so examples would be like deli meats, like pepperonis or sandwich meats, could be found in things like canned tomatoes, canned beans, canned soup, chicken broth, or any kind of broth really, as well as any prepackaged foods like frozen meals or microwavable meals, or things like mac and cheese, like with the powdered mix and things like that. So ways in which we can reduce the amount of salt that we have, because I know lots of kids do enjoy foods like that, is sometimes we can use half a packet of like the cheese powder and use a little bit more milk, or even with instant noodles, you can use half a packet of that soup powder and then add more water into it, because that soup packet has a ton of sodium in it. It's almost more than a day's worth for adults in that soup packet. Another way is to do without the soup packet in general, and replacing it with something like low sodium broth or reduced sodium broth. So this here I have is a chicken broth, and you can see in the front label here it says reduced sodium, 25% less sodium than regular chicken broth. So those are good alternatives to keep an eye out for. Also for canned goods, so things like diced tomatoes or any kind of canned tomatoes that you might be cooking with, looking for things like no salt added, or maybe there's ones that say reduced sodium. Either of those are fine. And also with canned soup, there's some certain ones that say less salt. This in particular says there's 40% less salt, which is quite a bit. And also, as I said before, the cold hard facts lie in the nutrition label. So when you're looking for salt content, you look under sodium. So you can see that this no salt added diced tomatoes only has 5 milligrams of salt per half a cup. And so what you're looking for are products that have 350 milligrams or less per serving. So this 5 milligrams is way less sodium, which is a great addition. And again, if you choose to salt your own food instead of what's already in the can, you're most likely going to be adding a lot less salt than what was originally in the can. One more thing, when we're still also looking at the sodium label, and other than milligrams, we can also move all the way to the end of this box here, and you can see that there's percents. This is the percent daily value, and typically the sodium we want to keep to under 15% of our daily value, and for nutrients like fiber, we definitely want 5% or more, but we know that tomatoes aren't necessarily a source of fiber, so that's okay. But specifically for sodium intake, you want to look for percent daily values that are 15 or under.